Have you ever wondered what race the Israelis were right from Abraham? There seems to be doubt as to who they actually were. My thinking is that they were Arabic, considering their brothers around them in the Middle East. This kind of question makes archaeologists, historians, and theologians fight like cats in a sack. Let's strip it down. But first, where are you watching from? Please comment below and perhaps consider subscribing for more bold and thoughtful narratives. Abraham himself came from Ur of the Chaldeans, southern Mesopotamia, roughly modern-day Iraq. That already places his roots in the Semitic world. The word Semitic refers to a broad language family, Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, Akkadian, etc., not a single race. In fact, the ancient Near East didn't think in our neat boxes of race at all. It was tribe, language, and land that defined people. By the time Abraham migrated into Canaan, he and his descendants were a Semitic people among other Semitic peoples. Their brothers, Ishmaelites, Edomites, Moabites, Ammonites, and later the Arabs, shared overlapping ancestry and language. Hebrew and Arabic, for example, are like close cousins in the Semitic language tree. So my hunch has weight. Culturally and linguistically, the early Israelites were close kin to what we'd now call Arabs. What makes them distinct in the record isn't race, but identity. The Hebrew tribes developed a unique covenantal religion and sense of chosenness that separated them from surrounding Semitic cousins, even though they probably looked quite similar. If you plopped Abraham, Ishmael, and a random Bedouin side by side in 2000 BCE, you wouldn't have been able to tell them apart by appearance alone. So the short version, they weren't white Europeans, nor something entirely alien. They were Semitic, part of the same larger family that gave rise to both the Arabs and the Jews. What makes the Israelites Israelite is less their skin and more their story, covenant, and evolving culture. The interesting twist is this. Over centuries of exile, mixing, and migrations, Jewish communities spread into Europe, Africa, and Asia, picking up diverse physical traits along the way. But at the root, Abraham's line sits firmly in the Semitic Middle Eastern family tree. There are several African Americans who claim to be Hebrews. Then the suggestion that they, Israelis, were predominantly white, hence my quest, considering what I have garnered from the Bible. Modern debates about the true Hebrews often say more about present-day identity struggles than about the ancient world itself. The Bible paints a picture of the Israelites as Semitic people of the Middle East, in the same general appearance range as their neighbors. Olive to brown skin tones, dark hair, Semitic facial features. They weren't white Europeans in the way Renaissance paintings depict biblical figures. And they weren't sub-Saharan Africans either. They were Middle Eastern. The white idea of Israelites largely came from European art and later colonial theology that reimagined biblical characters to look like Europeans. That's cultural projection, not archaeology. The claim by some African Americans that they are the true Hebrews usually grows out of two things: the shared experience of exile, slavery, and longing for deliverance, which resonates deeply with the Israelite story. A pushback against centuries of being told Christianity is a white man's religion by pointing out biblical roots in Africa and the Middle East. Historically, though, Israelites weren't Europeans, and they weren't African Americans. They were Semitic Middle Eastern tribes. If you met Abraham, Moses, or David, they'd look more like today's Palestinians, Bedouins, or Yemenite Jews than like Hollywood Moses with blue eyes. That said, the Bible's narrative of covenant and exile has been spiritually adopted by many groups worldwide, African Americans included, because it speaks powerfully to shared human struggles. The historical truth is, the Israelites were Semitic Middle Easterners. The spiritual truth is, their story has become a universal mirror for oppressed people everywhere. Let's further anchor my theories biblically. The Bible actually gives us little windows into how the Israelites looked, and it lines up neatly with what we know from history. 1. Moses mistaken for an Egyptian, Exodus 2:19. When Moses helped Jethro's daughters at the well in Midian, they ran home and told their father, "An Egyptian rescued us." That only makes sense if Moses looked like an Egyptian, and Egyptians of that era were brown-skinned, Afro-Asiatic people of the Nile Valley. If Moses had looked radically different, that comment would have been odd. 1. Joseph's brothers didn't out him in Egypt, Genesis 42. When Joseph rose to power in Egypt, his own brothers didn't recognize him. Again, if he'd looked visibly different from Egyptians, that disguise of position and clothing would have been harder to pull off. His appearance allowed him to blend in. 1. Solomon's description of himself and his people, Song of Songs 1, 5, 6. Here's a poetic self-description. I am dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, because the sun has looked upon me. This shows a natural Middle Eastern brown tone deepened by the sun. He wasn't describing himself as pale or European-looking, but as someone in the spectrum of brown skin that was normal in that region. 1. The Ethiopian connection, Jeremiah 13:23. Jeremiah makes a cultural point using skin color. Can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? This shows clear awareness of dark-skinned Africans nearby, distinguishing them from Israelites, but also puts Israelites on the same brown to olive spectrum that made sense in contrast. 1. Jesus in the New Testament. While the New Testament doesn't spell out Jesus' appearance, he was a Galilean Jew in the 1st century. Historically, that means short, average male height around 5'5", brown-skinned, dark-haired Semitic features. In Revelation 1:14-15, a symbolic vision, he's described with hair like wool and feet like burnished bronze, imagery that again connects to rich dark tones, not pale European depictions. So biblically and historically, Israelites were brown-skinned Semitic Middle Easterners, close kin in look and culture to Egyptians, Arabs, and other peoples of that region. It's only later, through art, colonial religion, and politics, that they got repainted white in Western imagination. Now let's trace how that shift happened, how a brown Middle Eastern people got turned into pale Renaissance icons with blonde hair and blue eyes. That's a fascinating history in itself. The whitening of biblical figures is one of history's greatest rebrandings, and it didn't happen by accident. Let's unpack it. Step 1. Christianity spreads into Europe. The early church was born in the Middle East and North Africa, Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria. But when the faith spread westward into Greece and Rome, Europeans began telling the story in their cultural language. Art started reflecting local faces because people tend to imagine the divine in their own image. Step 2. Constantine and the Roman Empire, 4th century. When Emperor Constantine made Christianity the empire's religion, it went mainstream in Europe. The Romanized version of Jesus, less Semitic, more Greco-Roman, became the model. Imagine toga Jesus. Fairer skin, wavy hair, European features. This was less about accuracy and more about making the faith look Roman. Step 3. Medieval Europe, fast forward to the Middle Ages. Christianity was now the dominant religion in Europe, but most Europeans had never seen a Middle Easterner. Artists painted Jesus, Mary, and the apostles to look like their neighbors, pale skin, sometimes even blonde. Think stained glass windows in Gothic cathedrals, holy figures as medieval Europeans. This cemented the white Jesus image in people's imagination. Step 4. The Renaissance, 14th, 16th centuries. This is when the image really locked in. Painters like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael created the most famous images of biblical figures, but they modeled them on Italian nobility and local peasants. Michelangelo's Jesus in the Sistine Chapel looks like a muscular Italian aristocrat, not a Galilean Jew. These masterpieces became global reference points. Step 5. Colonialism and the global export. When Europeans colonized Africa, Asia, and the Americas, they didn't just bring guns and trade, they brought religion. Along with the Bible, they exported European art. Suddenly, colonized peoples were shown a Jesus who looked like their colonizers. This reinforced the myth of a white Israelite identity and gave colonizers moral authority. See? God looks like us. Step 6. Hollywood seals the deal. In the 20th century, films like The Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston as Moses, and King of Kings, a blonde Jesus, cemented the image in modern culture. Even today, most children's Bibles in the West still show a light-skinned Jesus with European features. So, the short version, the Israelites were Semitic Middle Easterners. Europe repainted them in its own image for cultural and political reasons. Colonialism spread this false image worldwide. Hollywood kept it alive. Now the internet age is breaking that myth as people revisit history, archaeology, and the Bible itself. There is a portion of this Israeli history that is missing. It doesn't form a part of my quest into their race, but my inquisitive nature won't let it lay low. How is it that there was such a large number of Israelis in Germany during WW2? 6 million genocide? That wasn't small. Are the remainder the ones who were then sent back to Israel to form the country we now know? Let's untangle it. After the Babylonian exile, 6th century BCE, Jews scattered widely. Some returned to Judea, where Jerusalem is, but many stayed in Babylon, Egypt, and later spread through trade, war, and displacement. By the time of the Roman Empire, 1st century CE, Jews were already scattered across the Mediterranean. This scattering is called the diaspora, Greek for dispersion. Two big branches emerged over the centuries. One, the Sephardi Jews, based in Spain, North Africa, the Middle East. Two, the Ashkenazi Jews, based in Central and Eastern Europe, Germany, Poland, Russia. The Ashkenazi became the largest group in Europe, speaking Yiddish, a mix of Hebrew and German. By the 20th century, millions of Jews lived across Europe, with huge populations in Poland and Germany. So when Hitler's regime targeted Jews in World II, it wasn't biblical Israelites suddenly in Germany. It was the descendants of Jews who had been living in Europe for over 1,000 years. The 6 million murdered in the Holocaust were largely Ashkenazi Jews. After World II, the Holocaust created massive pressure for a Jewish homeland. In 1948, the State of Israel was established in Palestine, then under British control. Many Holocaust survivors and European Jews emigrated there, joining Jews who had never left the Middle East, like Mizrahi Jews of Iraq, Yemen, etc. So to my earlier question, the Jews in Germany were part of the diaspora, settled in Europe centuries before. The Holocaust decimated them. Survivors, plus other Jews from around the world, moved to the new state of Israel. That's how modern Israel came to be, rooted in ancient Israelite identity, but shaped by centuries of scattering and return. Here's the twist. Israel today is a mix of many Jewish flavors: Ashkenazi, European; Sephardi, Mediterranean; Mizrahi, Middle Eastern; Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, and more. The ancient Israelites were Semitic Middle Easterners. The modern Jewish people are their descendants, blended with centuries of diaspora.